banged up score, the BUS, and the Niners are in last place, which means they are the most banged up team in the NFL. And Barrows also wrote that according to Football Outsiders, the Niners have been in the top 10 in average games lost to injury or whatever exactly how they call that stat, adjusted games lost to injury. Niners have been in the top 10 every year for the last 10 years, and on the aggregate have lost the most games to injury. So the most injured team of the decade, the San Francisco 49ers. Congratulations. Pretty incredible. Because it has felt that. That's the thing. It has felt that way. I think so many times you're like, God, it feels like he always throws a pick. And you look, and it's just league average. It feels like they're always hurt, and in fact, they're hurt more than anybody else.
It feels like it really kicked in like that Harbaugh second to last year in the playoffs. I mean, they had a stretch where Bowman and Upati's legs were shattered. And like, I don't know if this is accurate, but multiple series difference. It was like Navarro Bowman carted off the field, Upati ankle shattered. Next year, remember the disaster? You had Bowman or Willis retires because of a bad foot. Bowman can't come back that year. Borland comes out of nowhere, and it's just kind of perpetuated to Kyle. I mean, they, as Barrows wrote, they admitted it. I mean, they fired everyone after Kyle's second season because Kyle had so many injuries first 2 years. And they redid the strength and conditioning program, the training program, all under kind of one umbrella. And nothing has changed. Like, nothing has changed. So they admitted something was going on, yet they still have the same problem. You and I don't know. I would imagine they don't really know because they're, I'm sure, doing all the right things, right? Stretching programs, eating the right food, training the right way based on all these guys' physiological, numbers and tests. But for whatever reason, they get in these games and their guys drop like fucking flies. You can be like, even Barrows wrote, like, yeah, even Trent Williams, freaky deal. Someone just fell on him. It feels like more guys fall on their guys than other teams on top of just like legitimate, and part of it is they do sign hurt guys. Like Jason Verrett has been hurt multiple times. He was a hurt guy for the Chargers. As someone told me with the Chiefs, like, I was like, God, this guy's a good corner, but he's hurt. He's like, is this growing? It's like, yeah, he had that with us. So I like him. And I mean, the Niners, I'm glad they signed him. I mean, JC Jackson, who remember everyone wanted, already got benched. This guy is clearly a really good player. Good team guy too. Feels like good energy. People just kind of just a winning. He's just easy, but he's hurt. It's just, and that's scary, right? Because his position is true. Him and Bosa are really explosive guys, and that injury is something that gives me great fucking concern.
Well, so does a Liz Frank. I put it in the same category as a groin. Like, when does that get better? Who the hell knows, right?
Who are you talking about?
Eric Armstead.
That's a problem.
Right.
Guy, when he's on the injury report, it's not just, it says ankle, foot. It's like it's multiple things. It's not just like Javon Kinlaw knee. It says Armstead, ankle, foot.
Eric says they're a physical football team with injury-prone players. Drewish guy says we play old school football and practice by new era player union standards. I mean, one thing you would say that's consistent from Shanahan to Harbaugh is they like the same type of guys. They like the Hufungas, who's, by the way, passed concussion protocol Sunday, but was back in the protocol on Tuesday, or I guess Monday. Sorry, this is Tuesday. So he came in with symptoms Monday and went back into the concussion protocol. And I saw a tweet before we started by Grant Cohn. I thought was a good insight. He said, you play really physical football, but you don't train really physical football. And so if your style is physical, but you're not prepared to play that way, then you're going to get hurt.
Ravens have had a bunch of injuries the last couple of years.
Ravens, I think, were the most injured team last year. They're pretty injured this year.
Eagles have battled it, and they've been a pretty physical team over the years.
One thing Barrows also wrote, as we're just putting all the pieces of this together, is that foot, ankle injuries, studies have shown are 16% more likely to happen on an artificial surface than on a real surface. I don't know, like McGlinchey, it said calf. That injury looked like a very hard fall on turf. Concussions happen from collisions with other people. They also happen with collisions with the ground when your head hits the ground, right? So
when we talked about Hufanga, it was the clavicle and concussions, correct?
When we talked about his college issues, yes, concussions in college, yeah.
I do think it's very fair that the NFL in the 80s and 90s, because you're like, well, how did Parcells and Buddy Ryans and Ditkas and Walsh's, I mean, these games were war zones. Well, they practice with pads. Whenever you met someone who's over 50 that played in the NFL, they'd be like, yeah, we wore pads all season long. I remember hearing Edelman on a podcast last year. They full scrimmaged for years on their bye week in the playoffs because they always had it.
Wow.
Well, where did Bill learn his football? In the 70s and 80s? And my theory, another theory I have, have you noticed quarterback play? Like, stat lines are not that crazy this year.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't just guys throwing for 400 yards left and right. They've never practiced less, ever.
That was kind of the point Brady made the other day, right? Is that football's bad because you don't spend any time together practicing?
Well, think about this, too. You know another theory I have?
No Toradol?
The amount of Bosa's, Kinlaws, he's a bad example because he's injured, but just this year, Thibodeau, Myles Garrett, Aiden Hutchinson, the amount of defensive linemen who are coming in the league every single year is not being matched by the same offensive linemen. Look at the 49ers and the Rams, two of the better teams last year. They're starting guys at guard and center that you've never really – I mean, the Niners probably have the most famous one in Aaron Banks, the second-round pick, but other than that, it's Jake Brendel, it's Brunskill mixing in, it's Burford a pick. I mean, I don't even know the guys the Rams are rolling out, but their D tackles are all pretty sweet, and they got multiple waves of
Niners, Niners got 3 lines of guys.
I would say most good teams in the NFL, their backup defensive linemen and the backup offensive linemen for NFL teams are not. They don't parallel each other.
No.
And that gap is widening.
Well, and I think you'd argue there are backup defensive linemen that are better than starting offensive linemen.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Whatever backup means. Because
think about this. Drake Jackson isn't a starter. What is Drake Jackson's equivalent as an offensive lineman? Pretty good player, right?
Oh yeah, but I do think there is to be fair to offensive linemen, there's 5 of them, they play every snap. Defensive linemen, there's 9 of them and they rotate. Right?
But this gets back to the practice stuff. Part of being an offensive lineman, former one right here, is to me the physical practices is kind of how they develop their calluses, especially guards and centers. Like I would say Trent and the top tackles in this league forever, Tyron Smith and Jason Peters when he was younger. Those guys are like fucking Joel Embiid's and LeBron's. I mean, they are freaks. But the guards and centers, there's a timing aspect with it. There's just a physical comfort level with it. Nobody practices anymore. We talked about this with Kyle. His teams are full of war daddies. We've seen them play in the biggest games, go on the road. You go to practice, and it's no different probably than like a USC practice or an Arizona Cardinal practice. Yeah. It all kind of looks...
Just because 50 Cent's playing on the sound system doesn't mean you're having a tough physical practice.
Here's another thing. When preseason games start, right? So you get that first 2 weeks of training camp that's like late July up until like probably around August 10th, where you just basically got 2 straight weeks. But even that, you get every 4 days, you got to give them a day off. Then there are the 3 preseason games. So let's just say all the preseason games you play are on Saturday. Well, if I'm a team, and the Niners are kind of a bad example because they play their guys a little, but not much. Well, Friday is not, you don't practice on Friday. You might do a quote unquote walkthrough or do some like cardio stuff, but it's not a practice. Then Saturday, for the majority of the league, and even Kyle's guys, a lot of them do not play Saturday. And then Sunday is a mandatory league day off. So think once the preseason game starts, of a 7-day work week, you got 3 days off.
Not to mention the 4th week,
which is basically a bye week. I don't see a lot of people are complaining about the sport, and it started with, I mean, Brady was the player that spoke about it, but now you're starting to hear like even fans are like, God, this is a little shitty. You can't tell me it's not a direct result of the practice stuff. The history of the sport is all about practice, and now they barely even practice.
Yeah. You know what's funny is like I'm watching the Pac-12 every week as you are. The quarterback play from last year to this year is significantly up. Like the offenses are killing it right now. But
they got way better quarterbacks, right?
They got better quarterbacks and they got better coaches. They upgraded some key coach spots. But last year in the Pac-12, the leading passer was Keaton Slovis of USC, 239 yards a game. This year, he'd be 10th in the league in passing with the same season.
Who's one? Penix?
Michael Penix from Washington. Yeah.
Who'd be two, Caleb?
I think it's Jaden DeLora at Arizona.
They're scoring
Now, their
points.
defense, now you'd be like, well, their defenses aren't great, right? That could be a counter.
Yeah.
But
I see that my counter to them is like, how many NFL D linemen right now are in the Pac-12 chasing around these guys?
sure. Yeah.
Now, it's a good
But
group.
but
like
the
you said,
same was,
Caleb,
but it was the
Rising.
same last year.
It's a lot
you know.
more NFL players at quarterback, right?
There's some really
Rising's
good
an NFL
receivers.
guy. Penix an NFL guy.
I think Penix is.
Caleb's an NFL guy. Is
I like-
DeLora an NFL guy?
I don't know. I'd take Penix on the 49ers, though. I'll tell you that in like the third round.
So Kyle when he drafts him this fall.
I think he's got some because he can push the ball. Anyway,
Is he a senior?
yeah. Well, yeah, he's like
Oh yeah, because he got injured.
might be a fifth year.